Luis Ramirez, President of Ramirez Advisors International. We've been around for just over 21 years, and we work primarily with border communities and their infrastructure development, key infrastructure projects that help the economic development of the region and are an integral part of the Arizona-Mexico trade corridor. Well, I think the best way to look at that is to look at the history of the relationship between the three signatory countries, Canada, United States, and Mexico. I'm going back to the original NAFTA agreement, that was ratified in '93 and implemented in '94. Extremely successful and built this unique grouping of countries that had synergies with each other: trade, manufacturing, logistics, proximity, which created a unique competitive advantage of North America versus the rest of the world. But our hope is that some form of the USMCA will continue. Ultimately, what we want to see is a duty-free, tariff-free trade between the two countries, the ability for US companies to invest safely in Mexico and vice versa, because that has proven to be extremely successful for both countries, in this case, all three countries. Well, I think the North America-China relationship is a tenuous one at best. The Trump administration has made it a top priority to change the dynamic of that relationship. Mexico is caught a little bit in the middle of that dialogue between the US and China. Clearly, we have seen examples of Chinese companies that were triangulating through Mexico to get into the US market. Components, parts, products, minor shift changes in the harmonized tariff schedule, and then entering the US market. We believe that has to change. That being said, there are a number of products, parts, components that are made in China that are not made anywhere else. So one of the things we're pushing for in that dialogue is that the US and the USMCA have provisions for a period of transition when those products are not available in North America. But clearly, rules of origin to recognize those US, Mexican, and Canadian companies that are investing in our hemisphere should have a preferential treatment over anybody else, not just China. And that's where we're focused on. But I'll tell you another thing. One of the things that we've been communicating to the US government, particularly to this administration, is that for every dollar spent in Mexico, somewhere around 40% of that, 40 cents of every dollar comes back to the US. For every dollar is spent in China, 2 to 3%, 2 to 3 cents comes back to the US. For US companies, for the US economy, for the US government, it is better for the investment to go to Mexico than to go to China. But it takes time to make that transition happen. And you want to get into the issues of intellectual property. How many companies have done business in China that all of a sudden, just down the road, somebody's manufacturing something that looks rather similar to the product they're manufacturing in China? The intellectual property protection provisions, both the USMCA and Mexican laws that protect that, are far stronger than what we've been able to see in China. I think people are focusing on the rapid response team as some people are complaining about it. I like to see it as the process is working. There is a review process, but it's a complex process. 35 years of doing this professionally, I've worked with many companies that want to go into Mexico and they want to do their own thing. They bring their own people in and they sit down and they get frustrated because people there don't speak English. And I'm like, Mexico speaks Spanish. We're fortunate that a high percentage of the population is bilingual. They recognize the importance of the United States and the US-Mexico relationship. But although there is a lot of business culture understanding, there's still cultural differences. Finding strategic partners, everything from a joint venture, all the way through those that provide you services that are in country, that have the experience, the know-how, the resources to help you develop your project in Mexico. The reporting requirements to the counterpart to the IRS, which is Hacienda, are very different than are in the US. So you can't just take your accountant and put him in Mexico. Radically different reporting requirements. you need expertise in Mexico to be successful. And the companies that have been there for decades and have done it well have built teams that integrate the advantages, training, know-how of the US operation with those that know the country and how to do business in Mexico. For the foreseeable future, we're going to have a lot of uncertainty. I can't start a day anymore without picking up my phone as soon as I wake up to see if any messages out of the White House have changed the relationship. And until we have certainty, that fluidity in the decision-making process is going to continue. When U.S. companies started doing business in Mexico in the 1960s, it was cheap labor. That type of operation in Mexico no longer exists. Highly sophisticated research and development, a lot of capital investment, capital-intensive projects operating in Mexico. You walk into some of these facilities, they're state-of-the-art, quality control, intellectual property, security of the facilities. I invite a lot of people to come down and see in Mexico how business is done in Mexico. It's no longer this very basic manual labor. It's highly competitive, very sophisticated, and companies that can integrate and analyze, not taking everything out of the US, that's not the goal, but leveraging what Mexico can offer to help lower your overall cost of production. It's just a win-win situation.